Now if you have a Honda and you find out that you are having starting problems, then stay tuned, because this video today could help you. Recently I have noticed that whenever I put my keys into the ignition, sometimes the car would just turn off again. Now if we look here and we turn the key over, everything seems to be going fairly normal. The lights come on. However, when I start it, the lights get dimmer and it just turns off again. See? Just like that. We'll try one more time. See? See? Just turns off. Now usually when the lights are dim on your dashboard, it's an indication that your battery could be low on power. So we have to go see if that's the problem. Now I've got this battery charger hooked up to my battery to see if the voltage checks out. So let's put this onto the negative terminal. And there we go. Put this into car mode. It's taking some time to get a reading. And as we can see, that we have about 13.5 volts. It's charging now, that's why you see it going up. But we have about 13.5 volts after 2 start attempts, so that's still a very healthy battery, nothing wrong there. So now that we know it's not a battery, the next thing we'd want to do is to check all of our fuses. One of the fuses is found under the hood next to the battery over here. Just simply open up the lid and check all the fuses. The next set of fuses is found in your car, under the dashboard, a little bit to your left side, right over here. After checking both sets of fuses, I've noticed that none of them have blown, so it can't be any of the fuses. So the next thing that you want to look out for is the main relay. Now your main relay in Civic models is found right next to the fuse box inside, and you can see it just to the left, the gray box with the brown connector. That's your main relay. What the main relay does is supply power via the key that you turn to your ECU, which in turn supplies electricity to your fuel pump. Let me explain the workings of the main relay via some diagrams.
In this first diagram, a situation is shown where the car is just turned off. We can see that voltage from the battery still travels to the main relay. However, this voltage isn't used by the main relay because the first circuit is open. This circuit can only be closed when the ignition is turned on. This diagram shows us what happens when our key is turned to the on position. Both circuits in the main relay close, allowing the power from the ECU to travel to the fuel pump, which in turn puts fuel into the common rail, which pressurizes the system for the startup. After 2 seconds in the on position, your check engine light on your dashboard will turn off, followed by a click. This click is the circuit in the relay opening, cutting off the fuel to the fuel pump, and this is done to stop your engine from flooding upon startup. When the key is turned to the on position, voltage is sent to your starter motor, which cranks the engine. At the very same time, the second circuit closes, which allows fuel back into the fuel pump, because your engine needs this to keep the engine going. The car is now running, and the key is released back into the on position as the starter motor isn't needed anymore.
Now there is a useful way to check to see if the circuits in your main relay are opening and closing, and that is to put one hand physically on your main relay like so, and to have the other hand, although you can't see it, onto your key and to turn it. Now when you put it into the on position, you're going to feel 1 click. That's 1. Your middle light goes off, that's 2 clicks, and when you start it, this is usually where the problem occurs, that should be your 3rd click. Now when the car did start up, it shook a little and the camera fell, so apologies for that. However, when the car did start up, I did feel a 3rd click, which means that the main relay in this car is not broken. Because these circuits in our main relay do open and close like they should, it's safe to assume that our main relay is not broken. And that only leads one thing, and that's the ignition switch. Right there behind your key. Now I could go out to a auto dealer and I can buy a new ignition switch, but I like to always try at a junkyard first, so we're going to get into the car and drive to the junkyard. So instead of buying a new one at the store, we're gonna go over here to this huge junkyard. Bound to have something. Well, looks like we found the donor cars. Here are the Civics. Let's go find mine. I think I see it over there. This green one. There we are. Well, if we look inside, the steering rack is completely taken out. So there's no point getting a main relay or an ignition switch because it's just not there anymore. But thankfully, because Honda's made more consistent, I think this Del Sol might have it. So this is what we got out of the Del Sol from the junkyard. It's our ignition switch, and as you can see, it has little contacts on it. So when the key is turned, it closes these circuits and supplies power to the main relay, which in turn starts the car. Now you might see that the contacts from your ignition switch are a little dirty, but all you do is you just wipe it off. It's not a big deal. Now of course, to put the new ignition switch in, you have to get the old one out. And all you need to do that job is a screwdriver. See? To get to the ignition switch, you want to get this plastic cover off from under and above, and that will get you access to the ignition switch. Now in order to get the panels off, you have to find 3 screws. One here to the left, there to the right, and if it comes onto view, one here, all the way in the back. 3 screws in total. Once you have got your 3 screws out, these 2 plastic panels separate from each other. They're held in with clips. If I can try to do this with one hand, I can take the top one out. There's one. And the side, there. And there we have that. Before we go any further, I have to remind you, you are getting into direct contact with electronics, so do disconnect the terminals from your battery before we do this. The next step you want to do is to get your screwdriver again and get rid of this screw and that screw. There are 2 screws that hold in the ignition switch. So to compare the ignition switches, on the table we see the new one, which I've taken apart and cleaned the contacts a little. And here we have the old one taken out of the car just now. I don't know how clear it is on the film, but from what I can see, the contacts are much more, well, gone compared to the other part. So basically there's a problem. The contacts weren't good enough, which in turn weren't strong enough to close the circuits. And when the circuits can't close, the car opens the circuits up again and the electricity stops, which means that no more electricity flows to the main relay, which in turn stops your ECU from working and stops your fuel pump from working. And we all know that if your car doesn't have any fuel, the car will not start. So after cleaning up your ignition switch and putting it back in with your 2 screws, all you have to do is put the terminal back onto the battery and see if the car will work. Now that we put our terminal back onto the battery, if we've done our troubleshooting right and we put the key into the ignition, this should have done it. Well, it's the moment of truth. Let's give it a shot. Now, last time when we put our key in, the lights wouldn't even come on properly. So let's see. Stand 1, 2. So far, so good. There you have it. So there we are. We've troubleshooted the problem, and we figured out that it came down to the ignition switch. So the next time you find that your Civic is having trouble starting up, troubleshoot and diagnose the problem. In my case, I went to the junkyard, and this only cost me €2.